So hey guys, welcome to a special video. In today's video, I'm actually going to be doing a series review. This is about CNN's The Movies. It was a six-part documentary series that aired on their channel, their TV channel, and I really enjoyed this series. So rather than just reviewing each and every episode that came out, I figured by the time the series was over with, by the time all six episodes aired, I would just kind of give you my overall thoughts of the show, things I liked about it, things I didn't like about it. Um, if we get a season two for whatever reason, whatever a season two would entitle, hopefully we'll get more of what I really enjoyed and less of the things I didn't enjoy as much. And things towards the end, I'm hoping that CNN will eventually offer or have for a show like this. So let's just kind of go over a little bit of all these things over the course of this video. Um, so for the CNN overall series, basically episode 1 was the 80s, episode 2 covered the 90s in film, episode 3 covered the 2000s to today, episode 4 covered the 1970s in film, episode 5 covered the 1960s in film, and then the final episode of the show was the golden age of film, which was roughly 1930 roughly to 1959. So that episode was more so about like Wizard of Oz, King Kong, um, a little bit of the Chaplin era, a little bit of the Buster Keaton era, things that kind of gave film their start. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was the first feature-length animated film, and kind of how that kicked off animation in film and things like that. I mean, making cartoons feature-length rather than just little shorts you would see in between a feature film and some news and things like that. So that's really what the show was about. Um, they would show clips from certain films, films that were either significant or had political significance, or something that the celebrities that they were able to track down for the show had opinions on and things like that. Whether it was actors or actresses, whether it was directors, whether it was producers or relatives of passed away cast and crew members who were still alive at the time that certain films were made and things like that. So really enjoyable show. Let's go over some positives and negatives of things I really liked about the show and things that I feel could have been better about it. So for my positives of CNN's The Movies, this is a very informative show. I really liked how insightful it was, how I learned about films that I never even heard of, and how they kind of shaped that decade over the course of 10 years or longer than that for some cases, for some episodes. Just very informative. It was very interesting to find out kind of what certain directors, certain actors and actresses, certain producers, um, certain relatives who were still living from the person who made a film or was a part of a film of some kind. Um, just very informative show. They did a great job really making sure all the information was there, making sure that whatever films they could cover over the course of 2 hours, whoever they could track down to speak on those films, they did a terrific job on all those things. The series I thought also really showed the impact of film. There was even times where people were, talking about like the Western genre, or they were talking about, um, independent voices, and there was even a scene in the 90s in film episode where Robert Redford was talking about how thankful he was with his commercial success in film, but he noticed that there was people who were different, people who um, just wanted their voice heard. They really weren't out there for the money. Yes, it was cool that they, in theory, could make money off their film, but what they were really after was um, their own voice to be heard, their own approach to be heard. And so that's kind of what started the Sundance Film Festival, which started up roughly in the 90s, it sounds like. It was cool to hear, how the Western genre was kind of the template of any story you could tell, and how that's kind of why people kept going back to the Western genre throughout like the 50s and the 60s and even part of the 70s and so on. There was just so many things you could tell in the West, and kind of how Americanized it could be, and how you could really tell any story you really wanted to an American audience through an Old West story. So there was this really informative, fun things to learn about with certain films, and it really showed the impact in film and how people kept coming back to the theater and how certain films really made an impact on people. It was also cool to see a lot of like really big, the film fanatic side of certain celebrities. Um, I had no clue that, yes, Alec Baldwin's an actor, but I had no clue he would sit down and watch classic films and kind of really study performances and really study, um, certain characters and certain kinds of films. One celebrity I was very surprised with, and it's really too bad that he's already gone. But it really makes me miss him more than after seeing, what he could speak on and stuff like that. I was really shocked to know how informed and how knowledgeable director John Singleton was. I think he did like Too Fast, Too Furious, Boys in the Hood. He's done a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, he's already gone, but he was very informative. I loved hearing how he felt about Jaws and Jurassic Park, and how a viewing of Do the Right Thing kind of inspired him to do Boys in the Hood. And every time he was on screen, I just really loved to hear kind of his opinion on certain films. And I don't know. Once again, it makes me kind of teary eyed just thinking that he's already gone, and kind of someone that knowledgeable in film. It's kind of, I don't know. It was his time was too soon. I really think that he could have really gave us some interesting films with the knowledge that he had and things like that. So I don't know, just something that kind of boggled my mind as I was watching the series for this. So and like I said, it was cool to see like Steven Spielberg and other people that you might not, because for example, I had no idea that Steven Spielberg loved Terminator 2 as much as he did. I had no clue, because I just figured he was busy making films of his own by that time, was already really famous by that time, and things like that. So really cool to see other celebrities kind of make a comment on films that weren't theirs, but films that they really admired while they were working on other things. I also got a lot of really good recommendations out of the series. Two films that I literally never heard of until I watched the series that I really kind of want to track down now and watch in particular are Being There with Peter Sellers, and Philadelphia Story with Jimmy Stewart and Cary Grant, and I believe Marilyn Monroe possibly, I think too. Um, yeah, and there's other films in there, like A Shampoo sounded interesting to me. I never heard of that one before. And there's a couple of other ones that I saw on during the run of the show that sounded really interesting to me too. So it was really cool to see a show where I kind of got good recommendations out of it. I heard about films that never heard before that I kind of want to track down now because of just how good the show made some of these movies made out to be for something like this. There's also some appropriate montaging. One thing they did that was really cool throughout the series was, let's say they were talking about this big film with Meryl Streep, um, rather than just going to a different film and then back to another big Meryl Streep film, they would cover all the big Meryl Streep films from that decade and then move on. They would either do like a commercial break and then they would move on to like the blockbusters of that era or the John Hughes films of that era. So, or even there, like they would show the John Hughes films together, and they would kind of work their way into other things that they were trying to cover throughout that decade and things like that. So, really appropriate montaging for me. I really liked how they handled that. Yes, there was moments where, like, if you had a favorite film that maybe was, it was big, but it wasn't like as big as like Jaws or Rocky or something like that. It would be a part of a montage. One film that unfortunately this happened to was the original Halloween. It's in the 70s in film, but it's just basically a part of of a montage to show that it's in there, but they didn't really have like people comment on it or anything like that. So really appropriate montaging. I really like how that was handled over the course of this series. For my negatives, though, I really feel like more notable films could have been covered. Once again, Halloween had like 2 seconds in a montage, and yet we have like a 5 to 10 minute time spent on like Bridesmaids in the 2000s, and I don't know. There was a couple of films there where I was like, really that it's joining the ranks of like Jaws and Rocky and things like that, and it's like, ugh, it's like you could have covered so much more within 2 hours, and you chose Bridesmaids. So there was a couple of times when I was watching the show, and I was like, oh, some of these choices could have been better. One thing I don't know if CNN would ever do this. I know Netflix did this with Stranger Things. I'm hoping they're going to do it with this too. Is some type of a media release. So if you could have this film on like this series on like DVD or Blu-ray or even 4K or even like digital media, I would love to own this. I don't think CNN's going to do it. I think they're just going to show reruns every once in a while of the show. I would love to see a media release. If they don't do it, I'm going to be really sad. I hope this gets some type of a DVD Blu-ray release at some point. I think this would be a hot seller, hopefully, if they ever choose to do that. There was some times too I thought the show favored politics over a craft of a film. So let's say, yeah, All the President's Men got nominated for some Oscars, but once again, I would have much preferred like Halloween or more time on like The Exorcist or more time on I don't know, on like Caddyshack or something, than something that clearly was favoring politics that were going on at the time, that something that maybe CNN would have interested in over like a moviegoer. So there was times where sometimes I felt the politics was kind of favoring over the craft of certain films. So I thought that aspect of the series was kind of noticeable every once in a while. I also thought some of the commentaries in certain films felt a little too short. There was some times where they were covering a big film. They would get like one or two celebrities to comment on it, and then that was it. They would immediately move on to the next film. So at times it got a little frustrating because some of these films are really, really impactful, like Psycho, for example, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, for example. And sometimes they only get a couple of minutes of footage and commentary. So I thought certain aspects of the show could have gave us more commentary on certain films because it was really interesting, and it was really too bad that some of that got cut short. I hope CNN does more reruns of the show. One thing I noticed after the Golden Age episode aired is I don't see any like reruns of like the 90s episode or the 2000s episode. Yeah, it's CNN. I'm sure they want to do more like news-based shows. I don't know how often this is going to get reruns, and that's really too bad because I really like this, and I kind of would probably tune into this over something else, really, if they choose to do reruns of this in the near future. So I'm hoping CNN does that. At the moment, it looks like they're not going to, but I would love to see that happen if they choose to do more reruns for the show in particular. So CNN's The Movies, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. I was very happy with this. I always tuned into it. I felt even kind of guilty when I had to do like a bathroom break in between commercial breaks, as out of fear of potentially moving a film, missing out of a film that they would cover that I might miss and things like that. I really felt dedicated watching each and every episode, which I eventually did. And obviously there's certain choices where I thought certain films got favored over other ones that could have been better candidates for being covered and things like that. Really happy with the show overall. I hope it gets some reruns, hopefully even a season 2 as well. And I would kind of hoping like to see them do maybe like a video games documentary series at one point, or even like a Wursten film. CNN probably wouldn't do something like that, but love to see them do it if they wanted to attempt to do that. So really enjoyed CNN's The Movies, and if it's ever on reruns, be sure to check it out.